September 28, 1939, was a pivotal day in the early stages of World War II, as Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union formalized the division of Poland with the signing of the German-Soviet Boundary and Friendship Treaty. This agreement, a direct consequence of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact signed just a month earlier, laid bare the grim reality of Poland's fate under two totalitarian regimes. The treaty not only solidified the partition of Poland, but also signaled a deeper collaboration between Hitler and Stalin, reshaping the political landscape of Europe and presenting new challenges for the Allied powers. The German-Soviet Boundary and Friendship Treaty. Consolidation of conquest. On September 28, 1939, in Moscow, Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union signed the German-Soviet Boundary and Friendship Treaty. This agreement followed the earlier secret protocols of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, which had outlined the division of Eastern Europe into spheres of influence between the two powers. The treaty marked the formal recognition of the demarcation line along the Bug River, effectively dividing Poland into German and Soviet zones of occupation. The treaty was a clear expression of the cooperation between the two totalitarian states, each seeking to secure its gains and consolidate control over the occupied territories. Under the terms of the agreement, Germany and the Soviet Union reaffirmed their non-aggression pact and committed to mutual consultation on matters affecting their common interests. Additionally, the treaty included provisions for economic cooperation, with both powers agreeing to exchange raw materials and other resources to support their respective war efforts. The signing of the treaty was accompanied by a joint declaration of friendship, which underscored the strategic alignment between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. For Hitler, the agreement provided a secure eastern border, allowing him to focus on his ambitions in Western Europe. For Stalin, the treaty represented a significant territorial gain and a buffer zone against any potential threats from Germany or the West. The formal division of Poland, sanctioned by this treaty, marked a turning point in the war, effectively erasing Poland from the map of Europe and demonstrating the brutal realpolitik that characterized the early days of World War II. The fate of Poland, a nation divided and subjugated. With the signing of the German-Soviet Boundary and Friendship Treaty, Poland's fate was sealed. The country was now effectively partitioned between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, with no hope of regaining its sovereignty in the immediate future. The partition resulted in the division of Polish territory, with the Germans occupying the western half and the Soviets taking control of the eastern regions. This division was not merely territorial but also cultural and ideological, as the two occupying powers imposed their respective systems of governance and repression. In the German-occupied zone, the Nazis began to implement their policies of repression and extermination. The German authorities moved quickly to dismantle Polish political and social institutions, replacing them with German administrative structures designed to enforce Nazi ideology. The Gestapo intensified its campaign of arrests, targeting Polish intellectuals, political leaders, and anyone deemed a threat to German rule. The occupation was marked by brutal repression, forced labor, and the beginning stages of the Holocaust, as Jewish communities were subjected to severe restrictions, forced into ghettos, and targeted for deportation and extermination. In the Soviet-occupied zone, the NKVD continued its campaign to suppress any potential opposition and to integrate Eastern Poland into the Soviet state. Local administrative bodies were dismantled, and Soviet-appointed officials took over governance according to communist principles. The Soviets launched a massive propaganda campaign to win the hearts and minds of the local population, portraying the Red Army as liberators and framing the occupation as a necessary step to protect ethnic minorities and restore order in Eastern Europe. However, beneath the surface, the occupation was characterized by widespread repression, mass arrests, deportations, and the brutal suppression of any expressions of Polish nationalism or resistance. The impact on Polish society, repression and resistance. The partition of Poland and the subsequent occupations by Germany and the Soviet Union had a devastating impact on Polish society. Under Nazi rule, the Polish population was subjected to a regime of terror and exploitation. Forced labor became widespread, with thousands of Poles deported to work in German factories, farms, and other industries essential to the Nazi war effort. The Nazis also pursued a policy of Germanization, which involved the displacement of Polish populations and the settlement of ethnic Germans in their place. This policy aimed to create a loyal German populace in the newly acquired territories while eradicating Polish cultural and national identity. In eastern Poland, the Soviet occupation was similarly repressive. The NKVD targeted anyone suspected of harboring anti-Soviet sentiments or maintaining loyalties to the former Polish state. Thousands of Polish military officers, civil servants, intellectuals, and landowners were arrested and deported to labor camps in Siberia and other remote regions of the Soviet Union. The Soviets also sought to reshape the region according to communist ideology, enforcing agricultural collectivization, nationalizing industries, and re-educating the population through Soviet propaganda. For the inhabitants of eastern Poland, the Soviet occupation meant the loss of their national identity and a harsh new reality of repression and fear. Allied response: reactions to the formal division of Poland. The signing of the German-Soviet Boundary and Friendship Treaty and the formal division of Poland prompted a crisis of confidence among the Allied powers, particularly the United Kingdom and France. The rapid and total defeat of Poland underscored the failures of Allied policy and raised urgent questions about the future course of the war. In the United Kingdom, Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain's government faced increasing criticism for its handling of the crisis. Public opinion was growing more vocal in its condemnation of the government's perceived failure to act decisively in defense of Poland, with many feeling that Britain had not fulfilled its obligations to its Polish ally. On September 28, the British War Cabinet continued to debate potential responses, including the possibility of increasing military aid to other nations threatened by Axis aggression and expanding economic sanctions against both Germany and the Soviet Union. However, logistical challenges and concerns about military readiness continued to constrain the British response. The Royal Air Force, RAF, remained focused on defensive preparations, while the Royal Navy maintained its blockade of Germany in an effort to weaken the Nazi war machine through economic attrition. The British government also explored ways to support Polish forces that had escaped to France and other countries, recognizing the need to keep the Polish cause alive even as Poland itself fell under occupation. In France, the government of Prime Minister Édouard Daladier faced similar challenges. The French military, heavily focused on defending the Maginot Line and preparing for a potential German offensive in the west, was not in a position to intervene directly in Poland. The French public, like their British counterparts, was increasingly frustrated with the government's perceived lack of decisive action. The complete occupation of Poland forced France to reassess its strategic priorities and how best to support the Allied cause in an increasingly hostile environment. International reactions, diplomatic maneuvers and strategic recalculations. The signing of the German-Soviet Boundary and Friendship Treaty and the continued occupation of Poland by German and Soviet forces prompted strong reactions from the international community. Many nations began to reassess their positions and strategies in response to the rapidly changing landscape of the war. In the United States, President Franklin D. Roosevelt maintained a stance of neutrality but was increasingly aware of the potential implications of the conflict for global stability. On September 28, discussions within the U.S. government continued to focus on expanding support to the Allies, including economic and material aid through measures like the cash-and-carry policy. This policy, allowing belligerents to purchase arms from the U.S. provided they transported the goods themselves, gained further support as a means of aiding Britain and France while maintaining American neutrality. In Italy, Benito Mussolini's regime continued to advocate for a negotiated peace, positioning Italy as a potential mediator in the conflict. On September 28, Mussolini reiterated his proposal for an international conference to resolve the war, seeking to bolster Italy's diplomatic standing while avoiding direct involvement in the conflict. However, this offer was largely dismissed by the Western Allies, who viewed it as an attempt to weaken their resolve and buy time for the Axis powers. Other neutral nations, such as Switzerland, Sweden, and the Netherlands, continued to bolster their defenses and prepare for potential spillover from the conflict. These countries, aware of their strategic positions and vulnerabilities, sought to maintain their neutrality while preparing for potential threats from both the Axis and Allied powers. Media coverage and global public opinion. On September 28, media coverage around the world continued to focus on the dramatic events unfolding in Poland and the broader strategic implications of the war. Newspapers, radio broadcasts, and newsreels provided updates on the military situation and the responses of the belligerent nations, shaping public perceptions and understanding of the conflict. In the United Kingdom, the BBC and major newspapers like The Times and The Daily Telegraph reported on the signing of the German-Soviet Boundary and Friendship Treaty with a sense of shock and condemnation. Coverage emphasized the plight of the Polish people and the betrayal represented by the Soviet alignment with Nazi Germany. Editorials called for increased support for other potential victims of Axis aggression and debated the merits of launching an offensive against Germany versus continuing a more cautious approach. In France, newspapers such as Le Figaro and Le Monde highlighted the humanitarian crisis in Poland and the broader implications of the Soviet and German occupations. The French press reflected the public's growing anxiety and frustration with the government's perceived lack of decisive action. Opinion pieces called for greater coordination with the British and a more aggressive stance to support Poland, while others warned of the risks of escalating the conflict without adequate preparation. In Germany, state-controlled media celebrated the signing of the treaty as a diplomatic victory that secured Germany's eastern flank and allowed for greater focus on future campaigns. Propaganda outlets like Völkischer Beobachter and Der Angriff praised the agreement with the Soviet Union as a pragmatic step to ensure peace and stability in Eastern Europe, while continuing to vilify Poland and its government as the true aggressors. Strategic implications and the road ahead. The events of September 28, 1939, underscored the rapidly changing dynamics of the conflict and the strategic dilemmas faced by all parties involved. For Poland, the day marked the formal division of its territory between two powerful occupiers and the beginning of a long period of suffering under brutal occupation. The Allied powers faced a complex set of challenges as they grappled with how best to respond to the dual threats of Nazi Germany and Soviet expansionism. For the United Kingdom and France, the day highlighted the difficulties of coalition warfare and the challenges of transitioning from peace to war. Both nations were still adjusting to the realities of a conflict they had hoped to avoid and were faced with strategic uncertainties regarding how best to respond to the expanding scope of the war. Conclusion: a war deepening and global stakes rising. September 28, 1939, was a day of profound significance, as the signing of the German-Soviet Boundary and Friendship Treaty and the continued consolidation of control over Poland highlighted the brutal realities of the Second World War. The events of this day underscored the challenges of coalition warfare, the limits of pre-war planning and preparation, and the unpredictable nature of a conflict that was beginning to engulf much of Europe and threaten global stability.